You ever notice how life keeps whispering the same message to you over and over again until it finally becomes impossible to ignore? There is a reason for that. There is a deeper intelligence inside you, one that sees far beyond your fears and long before your conscious mind understands what is happening. It speaks through dreams, through intuition, through the patterns that repeat themselves in your life. It shows you the path meant for you long before you have the courage to walk it. And the truth is, the moment you begin resisting that path, the unconscious begins shaping your world in ways that nudge you back toward your true direction. The feeling you call discomfort is not a mistake. The restlessness that keeps you awake at night is not confusion. It is the inner self reminding you that you are living beneath your potential, beneath your truth, beneath the life that was carved for you from the beginning. The teachings of the deeper psyche reveal something astonishing. What you resist the most is often the very thing that would set you free. And if you pay attention, if you listen closely, you will realize that the life you've been avoiding is the life that has been quietly waiting for you to return. When you stand before the path you've been resisting, there is always a moment where something inside you tightens, not because the path is wrong, but because it is true. The path you resist is rarely the one that is unfamiliar. It is the one that feels uncomfortably familiar, as if you've known all along that it was meant for you. And that familiarity is exactly why you turn away from it. It reflects you back to yourself. It exposes your hidden potential, your unspoken desires, your quiet truths, and the parts of you that you've spent years trying to manage or suppress. The resistance is not a sign of misdirection. It is a sign of proximity to the place where the self you've been carefully controlling begins to unravel into the self you were meant to become. You see, the truth has a peculiar way of unsettling us. We say we want clarity. We say we want purpose. We say we want direction. But when clarity arrives, it demands something of us. It demands honesty. It demands courage. It demands that you confront why you waited so long to hear what your inner voice has been whispering for years. So you turn away from the path, not because it is too difficult, but because it is too revealing. It shows you the contradiction between who you are pretending to be and who you truly are. It invites you to cross the threshold where excuses lose their power. And in that moment, resistance feels safer than truth. But if you listen closely, beneath the resistance is a subtle vibration of recognition, a quiet sense that you belong to this direction, that this is not something random brushing against your life, but something essential rising from within it. The path is not trying to force itself upon you. It is trying to remind you of what you once knew before fear became familiar. Remind you of the deeper intentions that existed in you long before doubt carved its patterns into your thinking. Remind you that you were never lost. The noise simply became louder than your inner knowing. Resisting the path becomes a habit, and habits become identity. You tell yourself you're not ready, that timing isn't right, that you must wait for a sign stronger than the one already burning inside you. But this hesitation is only a strategy to avoid the discomfort of becoming real. It is easier to imagine the future than to step into it. It is easier to postpone your transformation than to allow it to reorder your life. The irony is that the very resistance you cling to is the evidence that you're standing exactly where you need to stand. People do not resist what does not matter. We resist what calls us. We resist what feels alive. We resist what carries the power to dissolve our old limitations. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize that the path they resisted is not going away. It returns in different forms, through different experiences, through recurring thoughts and dreams, through the same emotional patterns repeating themselves. Life has a way of circling you back to what you tried to escape, not out of cruelty, but out of insistence, an insistence that you do not abandon your own potential. The path waits, not with judgment, but with patience. And yet each cycle of returning becomes heavier because you can only walk away from yourself for so long before the weight of avoidance becomes greater than the weight of change. And when you finally turn toward the path, there is a strange sense of familiarity, as if you are not beginning something new, but remembering something old. It feels like stepping into a room you left years ago, but were always meant to return to. The hesitation softens not because fear disappears, but because the truth becomes undeniable. You realize that the path has always belonged to you, and you to it. The resistance was merely the friction created by the parts of you that were afraid to evolve. What makes the path transformative is not its difficulty, but its honesty. It strips away the illusions you've lived with. It asks you to release the version of yourself built from fear, expectation, and survival. And it calls you toward the version built from authenticity, purpose, and inner alignment. This calling is seldom loud. It does not shout. It whispers, it nudges, it stirs your dreams. It pulls at you in moments of silence. And when you ignore it, it grows stronger, not out of force, but out of necessity. Because this path is woven into the structure of who you are. The path you resist reveals the truth you fear to see, that you are capable of more than the life you have settled into, that your discomfort is not a barrier, but a doorway, that your avoidance is not protection but imprisonment. The fear is not of failure, the fear is of becoming undeniable, because once you see your own potential clearly, you can no longer justify living beneath it. Eventually, resistance becomes exhaustion. You grow tired of shrinking. You grow tired of pretending. You grow tired of carrying the weight of an unlived life. And in that exhaustion, something shifts. The path no longer feels threatening, it feels necessary. It feels like the only place where you can finally breathe without contradicting yourself. And the moment you step onto it, even with trembling hands and uncertain steps, you discover that the path never asked for perfection. It only asked for sincerity. And so, the truth stands quietly before you, waiting for you to recognize that the path you've been resisting is the path that liberates you. There comes a moment in every life when you begin to sense that something within you has already made a decision long before your conscious mind catches up. You feel it in the persistent tug at the edge of your awareness, in the thoughts that return no matter how many times you try to silence them, in the unexplainable pull towards certain places, people, ideas, and possibilities. This deeper direction does not convince you through logic or reasoning. It simply appears as an undeniable presence. And even when you ignore it, it does not disappear. It waits, quietly shaping your inner landscape until you finally recognize that your unconscious has already chosen the direction your life is meant to take. The conscious mind likes to imagine itself as the master of decisions. It plans, organizes, analyzes, calculates. It projects scenarios, compares risks, predicts outcomes, and tries to maintain control over the unfolding of life. But beneath all of this effort, there is an undercurrent, a force moving silently, weaving impressions, intuitions, and subtle impulses that the mind doesn't fully understand. This is the deeper intelligence, the part of you that sees farther than your fears and remembers long-forgotten truths. It speaks not in language but in symbols, sensations, dreams, and patterns. And every time you feel a strong pull towards something without being able to explain why, it is this deeper intelligence calling you. Most people believe they are undecided, but indecision often means the decision has already been made at a deeper level. You're simply struggling to accept it. There is a quiet clarity that emerges when you stop arguing with your inner direction. You begin to notice that life itself has been providing clues. The same opportunities reappear in different forms. The same lessons repeat until you internalize their meaning. The same inner voice grows louder when you attempt to drown it out. It's as if your unconscious is gently guiding you, nudging you back toward the path you were always meant to walk. This inner guidance does not demand obedience. It never forces itself upon you. It allows you to wander, to delay, to resist. But in its patience, it brings you back again and again to the same doorway. And each time you return, the sense of familiarity deepens. You start to understand that this direction is not random. It is woven into your nature. It is the blueprint your deeper self has been carrying since the earliest moments of your becoming. Sometimes the direction manifests as a feeling of restlessness, a sense that the life you're living no longer fits. You may find yourself unable to remain in circumstances that once felt comfortable. Conversations feel empty. Old ambitions lose their meaning. Your sense of identity begins to shift quietly beneath the surface. This restlessness is not a sign of confusion. It is a sign of awakening. The unconscious is preparing you, loosening the old structures so that you can step into a life aligned with who you truly are. Other times, the direction arrives through synchronicity, those strange, meaningful coincidences that seem too precise to be chance. You think of something, and suddenly the world echoes it back to you. You consider a path, and life offers a sign pointing toward it. You contemplate a change, and the right person appears at the right moment with the exact message you needed to hear. These encounters are not accidental. They are the language of the unconscious made visible. They are the bridge between the inner world and the outer one, showing you that the two are not separate but deeply connected. You may resist this direction because it challenges the life you built around security and predictability. You may argue with it because it threatens the identity you've grown attached to. You may question it because it demands a kind of courage your old self never had to practice. Yet, beneath all the resistance, there is a deeper recognition. You know this path belongs to you. You feel it, even when you deny it. And the more you resist, the more persistent the inner pull becomes, not out of pressure but out of necessity. It is trying to bring you into alignment, to reconcile the outer life you live with the inner life you carry. There is something profoundly liberating in understanding that you are not lost. The direction has always been present. You simply needed enough clarity to perceive it. And once you realize that your unconscious has already chosen, something remarkable happens. The anxiety that comes from indecision begins to dissolve. The conflict between what you think you should do and what you truly want becomes quieter. You begin to trust that there is a deeper order shaping your experience, one that is wiser than your fears and more truthful than your doubts. This does not mean the path will be without challenges, but it means the challenges will no longer feel meaningless. They will feel purposeful, like stepping stones placed exactly where they need to be. And you will find that as you move in the direction chosen for you, life responds. Doors that once seemed sealed begin to open. The right opportunities emerge as if they were waiting for your alignment. People who resonate with your inner evolution appear naturally. The world reorganizes itself around your decision because your inner world has shifted. What once felt impossible begins to feel inevitable. The path you feared becomes the path that feels most natural, and you realize that the choice was never about creating a direction, it was about accepting the one that was already yours. The unconscious knows where your soul intends to go. There is a truth many people spend their entire lives avoiding. Whatever you run from does not disappear. It simply waits in the dark, growing larger, gaining weight, becoming more insistent. And the more you avoid it, the more power it gathers over you. This is why the path you resist feels heavier each time you approach it. You are not just facing a decision. You are facing the accumulated shadow of every moment you turned away from what you knew deep down was meant for you. Avoidance is subtle. It disguises itself as logic, as practicality, as responsibility. It tells you that you are not ready yet, that you need more time, that you should wait until circumstances align perfectly. But beneath these excuses lies fear of becoming who you are capable of being. It is easier to maintain an old identity than to risk stepping into a new one. And so the shadow grows. Every time you ignore the path that calls you, the shadow absorbs that energy, becoming more intimidating, more complex, more convincing in its arguments to keep you where you are. But the shadow you run from is not your enemy. It is simply the part of you that has been waiting to be acknowledged. It holds the traits, the desires, the strengths, and even the wounds that you were not ready to face. When you avoid the path, you are not avoiding the world, you are avoiding yourself. And the longer this avoidance continues, the more fragmented you become. Your inner world splits between the life you are living and the life that is trying to emerge. This division creates tension, anxiety, and a sense of inner emptiness that no external achievement can resolve. Something inside you keeps whispering, "This is not all." The shadow intensifies because it needs to be integrated. It seeks expression. It is a reminder of the parts of you that remain unrealized, and the path you resist is the doorway to that integration. This is why the resistance feels so strong. When you walk toward the path, you are not only moving toward a new direction in life, you are moving toward the parts of yourself you deserted along the way. Think about the moments in your life when something felt incomplete, when you sensed a potential you weren't living, when you knew you were capable of more but hesitated. Those moments are not random. They are signals, attempts by your deeper self to bring you back into alignment. When you ignore them, the signals intensify. Life begins to repeat lessons. The same emotional patterns return. The same discomfort resurfaces in different circumstances. This repetition is not punishment, it is persistence. It is life insisting that you stop running and begin to face what you've avoided. Avoidance amplifies fear while confrontation dissolves it. The moment you turn toward the shadow, something remarkable happens. It begins to shrink, not because it becomes less significant, but because you become more present. You realize that the monster you imagined was only a distorted reflection of your unclaimed potential. The very thing you feared becomes the source of your strength. The path you resisted becomes the ground where you finally feel whole. And yet, people spend years trapped in a cycle of avoidance. They wait for the fear to vanish before they take the first step, not realizing that the fear exists because they have not taken the step. The fear is not a barrier. It is a signal that you are approaching something meaningful. The mind fears what the soul desires. That tension is the hallmark of transformation. You are being pulled toward growth while being held back by the comfort of the familiar. When you continue to avoid, the shadow becomes the architect of your life. It shapes your decisions without you knowing. It dictates what you settle for. It influences the relationships you choose, the opportunities you turn down, and the ones you sabotage before they begin. Avoidance becomes a quiet prison built from the fear of facing yourself. And each time you retreat, the bars grow stronger. But the moment you truly decide to stop running, everything shifts. You begin to see that the shadow is simply the unlit side of your being, waiting for your awareness. When you bring attention to it, it softens. It becomes a guide instead of a threat. It reveals strengths you didn't know you had, desires you thought you weren't allowed to feel, and parts of yourself you abandoned because you believed they were too much or not enough. Facing the shadow is not a single action, but a willingness to step into honesty. It is the courage to admit that your resistance has been a teacher, showing you exactly where your growth lies. And as you face it, the path that once felt heavy begins to lighten. The weight lifts because it was never the path itself that was heavy, it was the burden of avoiding it. When you confront what you have been running from, you reclaim the energy you lost in avoidance. You begin to feel whole again. You begin to experience a sense of inner coherence where your thoughts, actions, and emotions are no longer at war with one another. And the path, previously intimidating, becomes a natural extension of who you are becoming. There is freedom in understanding that the shadow is not there to destroy you, it is there to restore you. It holds the truth you have been unwilling to see and the potential you have been too afraid to claim. And the moment you face it, you realize that you were resisting not because the path was wrong, but because it was yours. Avoidance strengthens the shadow you run from, but facing it sets you free. There comes a moment on every inner journey where the tension between who you have been and who you are becoming becomes almost unbearable. You feel yourself stretching between the comfort of the familiar and the call of the unknown. And in that space, fear rises, not because the path ahead is wrong, but because it demands that you change. Fear speaks with authority. It tries to negotiate with your potential. It tells you to slow down, to wait, to reconsider, to think about everything that could go wrong. And if you listen long enough, it will convince you that standing still is safer than stepping forward. But transformation begins the moment you stop treating fear as a negotiator and begin seeing it as a gatekeeper. Fear always appears where something meaningful is at stake. It tries to maintain the boundaries of the life you already know. It warns you, not because there is danger, but because the unfamiliar threatens the identity you've built. It is the voice that says, stay who you are, even when every part of you is aching to evolve. It presents itself as logic, as caution, as careful thinking. But beneath those disguises lies a profound truth. Fear shows up in the exact place where your destiny begins. When you allow fear to negotiate your decisions, you enter a cycle of hesitation. You start bargaining with yourself. You tell yourself you will take the first step tomorrow, or when circumstances improve, or when you feel more confident. You convince yourself you need more clarity, more signs, more reassurance. But every delay feeds the power of fear. Every postponed decision strengthens the old identity that is trying to keep you small. You cannot step into a larger life while negotiating with the part of you designed to preserve the smaller one. The moment you stop negotiating with fear, something inside you becomes firm. A quiet strength emerges. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's more like a settling, a knowing. A sense that even if fear remains, you will not obey it. And that simple inner shift begins to unravel the patterns that once held you in place. You start to see that fear has never been a sign that you should turn back. It has been the final threshold before a breakthrough. Every significant transformation requires a sacrifice not of your well-being, but of your illusions. The illusion of control, the illusion of safety in staying the same, the illusion that you can grow without discomfort. When you stop negotiating with fear, you let go of these illusions and make room for something real. You begin to understand that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to make fear your decision maker. You will notice that once you take even the smallest step, fear loses its argument. It becomes a background noise instead of a commanding voice. It no longer shapes your choices. It simply accompanies you as you move forward. And strangely, the actions you once feared become natural. The challenges that once seemed overwhelming become manageable. This is because fear is tied to anticipation, not experience. Once you act, fear has nothing left to anticipate. Its power dissolves in the presence of action. The old self clings to fear because fear is familiar. It is predictable. It keeps you anchored to what you already understand. But the life you feel called toward requires a new self, one that is shaped by truth instead of protection. When you stop negotiating with fear, you signal that you are ready to step into that new self. You make space for your deeper intelligence to guide you rather than your insecurities. And in that space, something remarkable happens. You begin to trust yourself. Trust is not built through thinking. It is built through acting in alignment with your inner knowing. Every time you choose truth over fear, you strengthen that trust. You prove to yourself that you can meet whatever rises. You begin to see challenges, not as threats, but as invitations, each one revealing a new dimension of your potential. Fear may still whisper, but its voice becomes smaller, less convincing, less relevant. And as this trust deepens, the world around you responds. New possibilities emerge. Paths open that were once hidden. People appear who resonate with your new direction. Life seems to rearrange itself, not because circumstances magically change, but because you have shifted. You are no longer the person who negotiates with fear. You are the person who walks with clarity. This shift is subtle but profound. You move differently. You think differently. Your inner world becomes less chaotic, less divided. There is coherence where there was once conflict. You begin to experience the calm that arises when your actions align with your deeper truth. And you realize that fear never had the power to stop you. It only had the power to delay you. In the end, the true barrier was never fear itself, but the belief that fear deserved your attention. Once you stop negotiating with it, once you recognize that fear is simply the echo of an old identity resisting its dissolution, you step into a new level of freedom. You become capable of walking paths you once avoided. You become capable of decisions you once doubted. You become capable of becoming who you were meant to be. Transformation begins the moment you stop negotiating with fear. There is a misconception that quietly shapes the lives of countless people, the belief that you must feel ready before stepping into the life meant for you. You wait for certainty, for confidence, for a sign strong enough to silence every doubt. You wait for courage to arrive fully formed. You wait for strength to appear before you take the first step. But readiness is not something you receive before the journey. It is something awakened by the journey itself. You are already equipped for the path you doubt you can take, but the proof of that can only reveal itself once you start moving. Most people underestimate themselves not because they lack ability, but because they have lived too long in environments that never required their deeper qualities to emerge. Comfort creates a narrow understanding of who you are. Routines, roles, and expectations shape an identity that appears complete, but beneath it lies a reservoir of capacity, instinct, and resilience that remains dormant. It is only when life pulls you into unfamiliar territory that you begin to recognize the strength you have been carrying all along. Think of the moments in your past when you were forced to adapt, when circumstances demanded more from you than you believed possible. At the time, you probably felt unprepared, overwhelmed, or unsure. Yet you navigated those moments. You survived them. In many cases, you grew from them in ways you could not see at the time. Those experiences did not come to expose your weaknesses, they came to reveal your strength. And if you look back honestly, you will realize that every significant moment of growth in your life happened before you felt ready. Life does not wait for your permission to unfold. It moves, and you move with it. The deeper parts of you awaken only when something requires them, but if you continue to wait for the feeling of readiness, you remain suspended between potential and action. You hold yourself back from becoming who you are capable of being simply because your current self cannot yet imagine the strength of your future self. The path ahead does not require the person you are now, it requires the person you will become through walking it. There is a profound truth in understanding that your abilities do not arise in anticipation. They arise in participation. When you step toward the unknown, you activate capacities you never knew you possessed. The courage you think you lack emerges. The moment you move toward what matters, the clarity you believe you need shows up once you commit. The strength you fear you do not have becomes evident when challenge meets determination. Every step forward awakens something in you that remaining still cannot. Many people believe they are lacking something essential: time, confidence, skill, support, certainty, when in reality they are lacking movement. Action reveals what thinking cannot. As long as you stay in your mind, fear has room to expand, doubt has room to multiply, and limitations appear larger than they are. But when you step forward, the mind adjusts, it recalibrates, it begins to support what your soul has already chosen. You begin to see that what you feared was not the path itself, but the imagined version of yourself who had not yet discovered your own depth. And yet, even with this understanding, resistance remains. You may feel that you're not worthy of the life calling you, or that others are more qualified, or that you have too many flaws to carry such a responsibility. But worthiness is not something you earn, it is something you recognize. The path does not choose you because you are perfect. It chooses you because you are capable of transformation. It chooses you because something in you is prepared, even if your conscious mind has not caught up. The truth is that every path that calls you contains challenges tailored to your growth. Not one of them is designed to break you. Each challenge is a sculptor, shaping the qualities within you that you have not yet learned to express. The strength you will need in the middle of the path will be awakened by the steps you take at the beginning of it. You are not expected to know everything in advance. You are only asked to begin. And when you begin, you discover that support appears in unexpected forms. People arrive precisely when you need them. Opportunities unfold that were invisible until you stepped forward. Clarity emerges that you could not access while standing still. Life meets you with a kind of cooperation that was impossible to sense before commitment. The world responds to those who respond to their inner calling. It is as if reality itself rearranges to match the courage of your intention. You will look back one day and realize that the strength you doubted was always present. It was simply sleeping, waiting for a reason to rise. The path you walk becomes the reason. The challenges you face become the awakening, and the person you become reveals that you were never unprepared, you were simply untested. So understand this: you do not step onto the path because you are ready. You become ready because you step onto the path. There comes a moment when life stops whispering and begins insisting. A moment when the quiet discomfort you've been able to ignore becomes a force you can no longer push aside. At first, it feels like agitation, like something is wrong. But look closer, and you'll see that this discomfort is not a punishment. It is a summons from the deeper part of you that refuses to let you stay half awake. For years, you've been walking beside your path, circling it, analyzing it, imagining it, even longing for it, yet never quite stepping onto it fully. You've told yourself you weren't ready, that you needed more clarity, more confidence, more signs. But what if the very feeling you've been trying to suppress is the sign? What if the path is not revealed by certainty, but by your willingness to move toward the unknown despite everything in you that trembles? The uneasiness inside you is the inner world pushing against the shell you've outgrown. And every time you resist the push, life sends stronger signals. Not to torment you, but to wake you. Because the part of you that knows your purpose is tired of waiting for your permission. It wants to breathe. It wants to step into the sunlight. It wants to stop rehearsing and start living. And it cannot do that if you keep negotiating with your fears, asking them when it's finally acceptable to begin. Your fears will never grant you approval. That is why your growth does not come from satisfying them, but from outgrowing them. When you resist the path that is meant for you, the world starts to feel heavier. You feel disconnected from your own actions, as though you are participating in a life that was pre-designed by someone else. You wake up, you move through the day, you perform your roles, but none of it feels like the expression of your real self. It feels borrowed, temporary, like a mask you can remove only when you're alone. And the longer you maintain this distance between who you are and who you pretend to be, the more this inner ache intensifies. That ache is not failure. It's alignment trying to happen. There is a deeper intelligence within you that recognizes when you are walking away from your purpose. It knows when you shrink yourself to avoid discomfort. It knows when you silence your instincts to maintain peace with others. It knows when you choose safety over truth. And every time you do, it sends a quiet message: this is not where you belong. You may ignore it for months, even years. You may distract yourself with busyness, with responsibilities, with the expectations of others. But eventually, that message becomes too loud to ignore. And here is the paradox: the very thing you've been resisting is the only thing capable of bringing you relief. You've tried living the way others expect. You've tried staying small. You've tried delaying your calling. You've tried reasoning with your own intuition. But none of it has given you peace, because peace is not found in avoidance. It is found in alignment. When you finally take one honest step toward who you're meant to be, something inside you relaxes, not because the path becomes easy, but because you're no longer betraying yourself to maintain an illusion of control. Your path has always been there, waiting. It has never been lost. It has never disappeared. It has never closed itself. The only thing that stood between you and that path was the belief that you had to be fully prepared before beginning. Yet the truth is that preparation is not the prerequisite, it is the result. You don't become ready and then walk the path. You walk the path, and that journey shapes you into the person capable of continuing it. Readiness is created, not given. Many people spend their entire lives trying to solve their fears in their minds before taking action. But fear does not dissolve through thinking. It dissolves through movement, through initiation, through small acts of courage that declare to the world, and more important, to yourself, that you are choosing growth over familiarity. Every meaningful transformation begins with one moment of honesty, the moment you admit that staying where you are is more painful than the uncertainty ahead. You are not being asked to leap. You are being asked to begin, to take one step, not all of them at once, to trust that the path will unfold as you move, to understand that the invisible support you've been hoping for arrives only after you commit. Life does not withhold guidance from those who walk with sincerity. It meets them with synchronicities, insights, inner shifts, and opportunities that were impossible to see earlier, because they appear only when you step into their realm. Right now, the path you've been resisting is calling you again, not out of pressure, but out of recognition. It knows who you are becoming. It knows what you are capable of, and it knows that you no longer belong in the version of yourself that was built only to survive. You're being asked to live now, not hide, to trust now, not postpone, to move now, not negotiate with the doubts that have already taken too much of your time. This is your turning point, the moment where resistance transforms into readiness, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally understand that the only way forward is through the door you've been afraid to open, and now you're ready to walk through it. There is a moment in every life when you realize that the path you've resisted is not just a direction, it is a doorway to a version of yourself you have only imagined in fragments, glimpses, or fleeting dreams. You have spent years turning away, doubting, delaying, fearing. You told yourself you weren't ready, that circumstances weren't perfect, that you needed more preparation. And yet, all of that waiting was not punishment, it was preparation of a different kind. It was the slow, often invisible unfolding of the self that was being readied for the moment you would finally say yes to your own truth. The moment you step onto this path, you step into alignment with a deeper, more authentic life, one that has been calling to you through every instinct, every pattern, every quiet nudge of your inner being. Walking this path is not about becoming someone entirely new. It is about reclaiming the self that has always existed beneath the layers of compromise, fear, and expectation. It is about stepping out of the life designed for survival and stepping into the life designed for wholeness. For years, you have lived with fragments of your potential, fragments of your desires, fragments of your voice, and even fragments of your courage. Each hesitation, each act of avoidance, kept you safe in a narrow version of reality, but it also kept you from living fully. And now, The path you've been resisting offers the opportunity to gather those fragments, to reclaim them, and to allow them to guide your steps. The first step onto this path is often the hardest, because it asks you to confront the life you've been resisting with clarity and courage. It asks you to acknowledge the parts of yourself that have been silenced, hidden, or ignored. It asks you to recognize that every time you turned away, you created distance from your own potential. But it also reminds you that the self waiting for you on this path is patient. It has been waiting without judgment, without condemnation. It simply exists, ready to emerge the moment you decide that the weight of resistance is heavier than the fear of moving forward. As you continue walking, you begin to notice subtle shifts. Confidence begins to rise, not as a loud proclamation, but as a quiet sense of trust in yourself. You begin to see the world differently. Challenges that once felt like obstacles now feel like invitations to exercise strength, wisdom, and courage you did not know you possessed. Decisions that once seemed paralyzing now unfold naturally, guided by intuition and clarity you could not access when you were resisting. Your mind begins to align with your inner knowing, and your actions reflect that alignment in ways that ripple through every area of your life. One of the most profound aspects of this journey is the awakening of your intuition. When you finally walk the path you resisted, you notice that choices become less about calculation and more about resonance. The noise of external opinion fades, and the quiet voice of your own insight grows stronger. You no longer measure your steps against what others would approve or expect. Instead, you measure them against the truth of your own inner compass, and with each step, that compass becomes more reliable, more vivid, more impossible to ignore. Purpose becomes palpable in a way it never was before. When you were resisting, your life may have felt fragmented, as if you were moving without direction, as if you were living someone else's script. But stepping onto this path reveals that your life was never meant to be an accident. Every experience, every challenge, every detour was part of the preparation for this moment. And suddenly, the disjointed pieces of your story begin to fit together. You can see patterns you could not see before. You can recognize the lessons hidden in moments that once felt wasted. You begin to understand everything was converging toward this awakening. Along this path, the relationships you cultivate also transform. You begin to attract people who resonate with your energy, your purpose, and your authenticity. The connections that were once forced or draining give way to relationships that nurture, support, and inspire you. You realize that the path you walk does not only reshape your inner life, it reshapes the world around you. Opportunities appear that were invisible to the version of you who resisted. Doors open that seemed permanently closed. The very fabric of your reality begins to mirror the inner changes you have cultivated. And yet, this path is not without challenge. It asks for courage, persistence, and honesty at every step. It calls you to face old fears, confront past wounds, and release identities that no longer serve you. But the challenges are not punishments. They are very instruments through which transformation is realized. Each difficulty you encounter is a mirror reflecting the areas of yourself that are ready to awaken, and each obstacle overcome reinforces the truth that you are capable of far more than you imagined. Ultimately, walking the path you have resisted unlocks something deeper than achievement, recognition, or external success. It unlocks the self you were born to become, the self that has always existed beneath the layers of fear, expectation, compromise. It reveals a life lived not in fragments but in wholeness, a life where purpose, intuition, courage, and clarity are not fleeting experiences, but fundamental aspects of your being. It is the life where you no longer measure your worth by avoidance or hesitation, but by your willingness to step into the truth of who you are. The path does not demand perfection, only presence. It does not require certainty, only courage. It does not ask you to be fearless, only to act despite your fear. And the moment you begin, you discover that the resistance you once feared was never a barrier, it was a threshold. A threshold that, once crossed, leads to a self that is undeniable, a life that is unmistakably yours, and a sense of destiny that cannot be ignored. And when you walk through that threshold, you finally understand this is who you were meant to be.